Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Daly. I spent 20 years with United Press International, most of it with the old UPI Radio Network. And my favorite assignment was going on the road producing and hosting American Montage. It was an hour-long weekly program. Now here's an edited version of one of those shows. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's American Montage. If you are a regular listener to this program, you know that I love roads and love highways. You and I have gone down Highway 1 on the Florida Keys and up north of Los Angeles near a place called Castaic. We found an old section of highway that was abandoned back in 1932, but if you know where to look, you can still go there. We are on a stretch of US 50 in Arlington, Virginia. Just 2 blocks behind me is my apartment. If you and I were to get on this road and head west and go far enough, we would come out just in front of where my mother lives in southern Indiana. For my hometown, Washington, Indiana, is on Highway 50. If you have read the book Road Trip USA, you know that it has been called the loneliest road in the United States. The author, Jamie Jensen, is here. We're going to talk about America's back roads and highways on this week's American Montage. Jamie Jensen here in Arlington, Virginia, and we can see downtown Washington and the Washington Monument from here. It is a 6-lane, if you can call it a superhighway, threading through a residential area, but Highway 50 isn't like this all the way to the U.S. It would take us about 12 hours to talk about what you've done in your book, Road Trip USA. But I have an affinity for Highway 50. Let's talk a little bit about that road. It is probably the only east-west right-of-way from the original federal highway system that was never interstated straight through.
No, I mean, it's got interstates to either side of it, but it runs straight across the middle of the country, and it's all the way. In fact, I live at the very far end of it out in Sacramento, California, which is about 3,000 two-lane miles from here, and a great ride all the way across the country, and you see lots of things between here and there.
How many days, weeks, months the past couple of years have you spent out on America's back roads?
Ooh.
A lot, I would suppose.
A lot. I've done easily 100,000 miles, and I take quite a lot, like 3 to 6 week trips as often as I can manage to get away, and probably about 4 months a year for the past 4 years or so on these roads, traveling around the country. So.
Do you take your own car? Do you fly into a city and rent a car? How do you do it logistically?
A little of both. The best thing has been flying in somewhere like Atlanta, picking up a car for $100 a week and taking it for 6 weeks and bringing it back with 15,000 miles on it, a brand new car, and you get some very strange looks after that.
Well, now, I think there is an affinity to America's back roads. My listeners know that my hero is Charles Kuralt, and I describe American Montage when we are on the road as being a Charles Kuralt-ish program. I have great fun if you know what a topographical map is. It is that wonderful thing the Geological Survey produces with great detail. You can even see farmhouses and what type of poles hold up the electric wires. It's very detailed. I like to get off the beaten path and do that. As a matter of fact, I've come up with a phrase I want to use for a show, off the beaten map, to go where I'm going. What has sparked, I know Charles Kuralt and that type of thing is part of it. What has sparked our interest in finally falling out of love with the billion-dollar interstate highway system and finding the roads, a lot of them, before they disappear forever?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it was, again, Charles Kuralt, what he said, you can take the interstate highways, drive up and down and across the country and never see anything. And it's that sort of idea where the interstates they're pretty much the same everywhere you go. There's no distractions, there's nothing to stop for, there's everything you need. There's gas stations, motels, fast food. If you're bombing across the country, they're great, but if you actually want to see something, you're in the wrong place.
How did you get involved in all this? Your book is published by Moon Publishing out in California. Did you always have an affinity for highways when you're not writing books? Are you a dentist, or how does this all fall together?
No, I've been fortunate. I studied to be an architect, but I've ended up writing. I live out in California, write a lot of guidebooks to San Francisco because everybody wants to go to San Francisco, and so. But I've always loved, since I was a kid, sitting up front with, I was navigator on all the family road trips, and I've still kept that. And one of, like you say, old maps, when I travel, I get maps from the 30s, 40s, 50s, and follow those roads and kind of figure out where they went before the interstates came through and obliterated all the great places.
That is the difficult thing. I call it geographic archaeology. You go out, and quite often they'll build an interstate highway, and they'll put it right on top of where the old road went. So the old road isn't there anymore. Now, sometimes you'll drive down a 4-lane highway and you know which side was the old 2-lane road because the old bridges are still there. Or if it's not an interstate where you have access, there are more businesses on that one side than there are on the other side, and that's kind of a giveaway. Sometimes you'll come to a place where they didn't have room to make it 4 lanes, so the other lane kind of wanders off, and there's a huge wide median. Jamie called US 50 the loneliest road in the U.S. I asked him about the origin of US 50, one of the original numbered highways from the old federal system, back when cars were just becoming popular.
Parts of it across Nevada, which is really the loneliest road tag really first stuck to it, it's the old Lincoln Highway, which was the first transcontinental highway. 1915, it was blazed, but it was just a dirt road until 1930 or something like that, and it's still the road you follow. If you take US 50 out across Utah and Nevada, you're following in like the oldest road, and across Colorado it follows, in Kansas it goes right on top of the Santa Fe Trail. So there's a real embedded history of America out there, as well as great kitschy Americana, the old rusty motel signs and great diners. There's a little bit of everything out there, really.
One of my favorite sections of old road is a section of US 66 that it goes through Hackberry, Arizona.
Yes.
That the interstate came through Williams and the area south of the Grand Canyon, replacing 66 and its right-of-way. But then all of a sudden, where the old highway went north and made a big loop, the interstate went straight across the desert. So accidentally they preserved 50, 60 miles up through
more
there?
Like 100, I think.
Really?
Yeah, a great stretch, and it goes up right, past the Grand Canyon, and there's great mountains and some old gold mining towns, and that's one of probably the longest stretches. There's a couple in Oklahoma too, but this is Route 66. You say US 66, and people don't always know, but everyone's heard of get your kicks on Route 66.
What is the north-south road that you talk about? It connects the Dakotas with Mexico.
US 83, we call it the road to nowhere because you can drive it. It's 2,000 miles nearly and goes from Brownsville, Texas up to Canada, and there's nothing you've ever heard of before out there but giant prairie dogs and all sorts of great stuff, little things that are, great bakeries, little towns. It's a marvelous ride. And
what is the food like? My listeners know I like to eat. What is it like to get off the interstates, away from the look-alike sandwiches, and just find a little main street restaurant that only the locals know about till you find it?
Well, that's the real, I think, advantage of traveling these roads, is that you get not only better food, but it's a whole lot more interesting. The people you meet, it's Joe's Diner or Kathy's Barbecue or whatever, and, great pies, great cups of coffee. And sometimes they're a little bit like they haven't seen a customer in a while, and that piece of pie has been sitting there for a while. But most of these places are, like you say, it's where the locals hang out. You can overhear some great conversations. If you're a wannabe spy, it's a great place to figure out how these places work and what the real thing that goes on there.
It's always amazed me that people will spend big bucks to go to the familiar sites in this country. And Lord forbid, I have nothing against going to San Francisco. I mean, I would be there in 5 minutes if I had a job in San Francisco. There are other magic places I've discovered. I finally got to Seattle. I've spent time in San Diego. I've been to the Grand Canyon. And then there's some great small towns. We were talking about Arizona. Flagstaff is a wonderful city.
Excellent, yeah. I mean, I think it's the mountain biker mecca these days, because there's a little college there, and you can ski in the winter and mountain bike up near the Grand Canyon all summer, and it's clean, and that's a beautiful spot. And there's lots of places like that. I mean, all these telecommuters and stuff, I think, are discovering these places and bringing urban life to them. But yeah, there's tons of great places out there.
Jamie Jensen, thanks a lot. The book is called Road Trip USA. A heck of a lot of work went into it, and thanks for putting it all together.
Well, thanks for meeting me out here. This is a great place.
And there you have it, another edited episode of one of the American Montage programs prepared for the UPI Radio Network back in the 1980s and 90s. I'm Dennis Daly. Thanks for listening. Thanks for going with me this week. And check YouTube for more American Montage programs.